Hello, everyone. Give a couple minutes for people to filter it. Thank you for waiting. Great. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can stay on time and on track. So, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on Unlocking the Power of Emotional Regulation. My name is Dowd Wong. I go by she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Manager of Community Programs here at the Tourette Association of America. I'm also joined by my colleague, Wendy Wegman, Senior Director of Programs, who will be helping me in the Q&A and chat tonight. Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for being on. Before I start into our content for tonight, I just want to say that tonight's event is being provided as part of the Tourette Health and Education Program in partnership with the CDC. The views expressed by speakers and moderators tonight do not necessarily reflect the official policies of the Department of Health and Human Services, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial practices, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. So we're very excited to present tonight's virtual program on emotional regulation. We'll be hearing from both a clinical expert and a young adult, both who have Tourette syndrome, share their knowledge on this topic. After tonight's presentation, we'll be asking attendees to partake in a brief survey. So let us know what you thought of tonight's program. Tonight's session is made possible by support from the CDC. So not only is your feedback important to us at the TAA, but also demonstrates to the CDC the value of programming like tonight. So when that QR code goes up later tonight, we really appreciate it. You can take a quick moment to answer that. A few housekeeping items. Please remember to put your questions into the Q&A so we can capture those later for our Q&A session. And you can use the Zoom chat to share reactions, comments, and/or resources, and we'll do the same on our end. And with that said, I want to go ahead and start introducing our wonderful speakers for tonight. Dr. Charles Gallion is a practicing clinician who specializes in working with Tourette's and related compulsive behavioral disorders, autism, and anxiety. He primarily works with children, teenagers, and their families. Dr. Gallion believes strongly in the value and importance of educating parents and professionals, so children and teens receive the support and guidance they need to be able to thrive. Dr. Gallion also has lived experience as an individual with Tourette's and a parent of a child with Tourette's. Next up, we have Jossie. Jossie Sevilla, 24 years old, has Tourette syndrome and is a TAA rising leader. She has a master's degree in social work and has been working clinically in youth behavioral health for 3 years now. She's currently working in a school setting. She graduated from the University of West Florida in Pensacola, Florida. Jossie's favorite activities are improv, musical theater, and volleyball. Her goals for the future are to get her clinical license as a social worker and one day have her own practice. She's very passionate about telling people her story. She's published 1 book already, is in the process of writing a second one. Jossie is very grateful for the TAA and for Camp Twitch and Shout, because without them, she doesn't think she would be nearly as proud to say that she has Tourette syndrome. So she thanks the Tiki community for the endless support and hopes you enjoy tonight's presentation. Great. Welcome, Charles. Welcome, Jossie. So before we launch into tonight's didactic portion, we're actually going to launch a knowledge pre-test to gauge our audience's knowledge before and after tonight's presentation. So Wendy, please go ahead and activate that pre-test poll for us. Thank you so much. I'm going to give a couple of seconds for the audience members to answer. First question is true or false? Being mad is a problem and we should stop it from happening. Right. Our second question is, which of these functions below can help with regulation when you're feeling strong emotions? Right, I'm going to give a couple of seconds for people to answer. I want to see 100% participation. Can we do it? All right, keep going, folks. Thanks so much for answering. Okay, we'll review the answers at the end, so hold your horses. Cool. All right. Couple more seconds. Right. Time to get some answers in here. All right. Well, I think I'm going to have to close it soon. So I'm going to go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll, Wendy, for us. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with our didactic portion for tonight. So Charles, if you want to go ahead and start screen sharing your slide, whenever you're ready to go, floor is yours.
Mhm. Let's see. Is that showing up for everybody?
I can see it.
All right, great.
It's-
So, good evening, everybody. I'm really glad that you all were able to join us this evening, and I'm extremely glad that the TAA has managed to put on this program for addressing what I think is a very important and helpful topic for all of us who experience Tourette's and all the things that come with that. So, I'm going to be trying to keep this short and not be too talkative and chatty tonight. I do have a tendency to do that. So I'm going to try to get straight into this, but as questions show up, I would just remind you also to use the Q&A function, post your questions in there, and we'll look forward to seeing them and trying to answer them afterward too. So with anger and other strong emotions, we typically tend to think of them as being a bad thing or a problem because this is what we end up getting taught as we grow up. It's natural, I suppose, for adults to teach children that they need to control their emotions or that they need to regulate themselves in some way and stay calm. And it's not that being told to be calm is necessarily a problem in itself, but we can take that message and we might end up really committing to it and then struggling to actually achieve it. And when we struggle to achieve it, we feel more stressed and more agitated, and the emotions actually tend to get stronger rather than settling down. So, one of the things that I think is a good starting point is beginning by practicing accepting that sometimes we do get mad or other strong emotions like anxious or embarrassed or even happy. And those emotions might make it harder for us to do the things we wish to do or the things that we intend to do. So we might end up saying things that we didn't mean to say or doing things that we wish that we had been able to stop ourselves from doing. So we want to be able to shift away from this notion of being mad is bad because this is usually what we're taught, and it's not helpful. And when we're told, control yourself, that's one of the most common things we hear, and it never really seems to help. People give you all kinds of things, like they'll tell you, I want to tell you this thing, but you have to promise me you're not going to get mad. And it's like, that's an indication that I'm probably actually about to get mad. And that's not helpful. Or they tell you, calm down. The likelihood that calm down is actually going to work to help us calm down is pretty low. I haven't seen many children or adults actually be able to calm themselves when they've been told to calm down. We're given tools like count to 10, take deep breaths, and these are not bad ideas, but if we assume that we can do these things and the result is that we're going to feel calm, then we are likely to be frustrated and disappointed when that doesn't happen. So, on the other hand, I would look at those as these are things I can do for myself when I am feeling this way, but I might continue to feel mad or embarrassed, or even, again, just very excited and happy, even after I've tried counting to 10 or taking deep breaths. So, if we can look at those techniques or those suggestions as ideas, but not solutions, then I think we're less likely to actually end up compounding that, making ourselves feel even more upset when we didn't achieve the goal or the outcome that we thought we should. So we tend to assume that we can control our emotions, which is probably misleading and not helpful. And if we look at other things that we cannot actually control, but that aren't a problem, then I think it becomes a little bit easier to treat our emotions the same way. So, for example, as it mentioned this on the slide, things like sneezing or belching or things like that. These are things that just kind of happen. They aren't necessarily things we want to happen, but we don't usually feel especially bothered by them, not like we do with our other emotions. So these are things that come up and they will go on and we will move on with our lives. And if we can treat emotions in the same way that I feel my emotion, and I know what it feels like when I feel angry or if I feel embarrassed, and the feeling will show up, I'll recognize the sensations that accompany it, and then eventually it will go on. I don't have to get stuck with trying to fix it. That's not what I really need to be doing. And instead, we can treat our emotions themselves as just advisors. They give us information, they give us suggestions, and that might be useful sometimes, and it might not be useful sometimes. So we can also disregard the advice. We can say like, oh, yeah, I hear you. I'm feeling mad on, maybe I feel like, uh, hitting my keyboard, but I don't think I'm going to do that, brain. Thanks. And it's like, I hear you, but this isn't really going to help me much. So I'm going to ignore your advice this time. And that gives me a little bit more freedom than to also not get as agitated by it. So why do we have this experience with our emotions? Why do we tend to get stuck with them? And I think if we look at the emotions as something that we learn to think of as a problem, then it becomes something we feel like we need to fix. And our brains are really good at fixing problems. I mean, that's one of those things that humans have been doing for as long as we can recall. And overall, we're pretty good at fixing things. It doesn't mean we always have the right solution, but we're pretty good at trying to fix them. And this quality has been really helpful for us overall as a species. But to fix a problem, we have to find a problem. And that means that our brains are always scanning and looking for the problem. And emotions end up being one of those things that we do tend to label as a problem and that we try to fix. One of the things that's perhaps interesting about the brains of individuals with Tourette's is that our brains seem to be especially good at trying to fix problems. These brains are really focused on this, and that means they're very sensitive to the problems, which then also means emotions become identified as one of those problems, and our brains are more likely to get stuck with trying to fix it and then feeling more worked up when we can't fix it. So we kind of get stuck in a loop of, I'm feeling something that's really strong. That's bad. I shouldn't feel something strong. It's going to get me in trouble. So I better control it. I can't control it. It's getting worse. Oh no. So now what am I going to do? And then I might lose more control over what I actually am trying to do. So this fix it pattern doesn't always help us, but it is natural for it to be there. It's totally normal, just not always useful. And I think it's helpful to regard it in that way. That, yeah, if I feel like it is a problem, that's normal, but I can't necessarily fix it, and that's okay. So what does the brain tend to do if we can't fix a problem? Well, then we kind of go back into this loop that I tried to diagram out here with the help of characters from, I guess, one of my favorite movies, actually. I tend to like Wreck-It Ralph a lot. I'm not sure which of the characters I relate more to. But we have this system where the brain finds a thing, evaluates, is that thing a problem? If it's not, then the brain is happy. If it is a problem, then the brain tries to fix it. And that means it engages in some kind of action to fix it. And actions that we engage in might include things, well, like what we end up seeing with tics, is that we perform a tic in order to fix the problem as our brain has identified it. But other things that might involve being angry, saying something, unhelpful things like hitting something. It's like that didn't really help me, but that's what I've ended up doing. Crying, seeking some kind of distraction. That's a common thing for us to do too. Like maybe we try to go out, take a walk, or listen to music, and those are not destructive and they might even help us sometimes. But after we do the action, then our brain looks at it again and says, did it work? Did it fix it? No, I'm still feeling angry. Well, now what? And then it ramps up instead. It goes back to the action, but tries the action harder because the brain has learned before that those actions have helped. And so it's not going to give up on them. It's going to use them again, but try them harder. I like to joke that yelling is basically talking harder because talking is something that we use a lot to fix our problems. And if it didn't work, well, we'll talk harder and see if it works that time. So we end up yelling or things of that nature. So our brain's backup plan eventually fails, and then we may at that point kind of lose our capacity to regulate our emotions. We may no longer be able to regulate our behavior. And then we might lose control of ourselves and do something that we regret later. And it's okay to regret it. It's also okay to recognize like we don't always have the ability to deal with it the way we want to. And sometimes we will not be able to control our actions, and we might do something that we feel bad about. That's natural, it's normal, and rather than beating ourselves up for it, it's more useful to say, well, what can I do about it next time? And how can I try to actually be compassionate with myself because I just experienced a loss. I failed in what I was trying to do, and that's it. That feels really frustrating too. So maybe I actually need to take care of myself for a moment before I move on. Beating ourselves up only sort of underscores for the brain that that whole experience was a problem and makes it more likely that we're going to feel more stressed out the next time. So we want to try to shift away from the typical pattern of I am trying to fix it, I can't, I get frustrated, I lose my cool, I blow up and I say something and I regret it. Now I'm not going to beat myself up anymore, though. Now I'm going to recognize, I wish I'd managed to do that differently. What can I do after this to try to take care of the situation? So we try to introduce the idea of giving ourselves choices and injecting choice as something that we can use as the alternative to what we did before. So if the brain wants to try to fix it, sure, yes, that's natural. The brain is going to try to fix the problem. But we don't necessarily have to engage that. We don't have to indulge our brains and say, oh, I am going to fix it. Like we can choose to, but we can also choose not to. And if we can grant ourselves that opportunity for choice, we can put that in between, like feeling angry, I feel the, or any other strong emotion. It's there. And I know what I usually do. But now I'm going to put choice in there and decide, do I want to do what I usually do, or do I want to do something different? Because that provides the opportunity for us to change the usual pattern. It doesn't have to go the same way as before. We can try to put choice in there, and we won't always succeed. That's important to keep in mind, is of course we won't always succeed at using choice, but we can put it in there and begin practicing it. And when over time, we will get better at being able to make a choice. And we must allow our old pattern to be a choice. That can be an option. And this is something I also tell a lot of people I work with who have tics and other compulsive behaviors, is that it's not that you must always not do the thing. It's just, I would rather you have the choice. Do you want to do the tic, or do you want to do the compulsion this time? Do you want to yell when you're angry? And if you do, make it a choice. Decide to do that. Give yourself that opportunity. And then at least you create the chance for it to be something other than what it has always been. And it doesn't feel like we're as helpless. We don't tend to do very well when we feel helpless. So you want to give yourself back that opportunity to have some control over your life. So I would describe this choice as a pre-behavior. It's a thing that comes before whatever you're actually going to end up doing. So it is itself a behavior, but it's when you're kind of injecting in between this chain, which sounds I think, kind of wordy and technical, so I don't want to necessarily dwell on that. But I do want to make clear that all the stuff that we've done in the past, that is always a part of us. It's always an option. It never totally goes away, and we shouldn't expect it to. What we're trying to do is to provide the opportunity for us to take a different route. So we do want to practice using choice, and it takes practice because your brain doesn't ordinarily engage that function when you're feeling a lot of stress or strong emotions. So you pick a chance to give it a try and see what happens. It's like, okay, I'm going to try and make a choice this time. And maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. And if it doesn't, that's okay. That's why it's practice. So one of the things I usually like to use as a choice or an option is communication. Now, a lot of the things that we do have a purpose. If I get really angry or overwhelmed and just totally stressed out, there are things that I might do that are intended to give me a break from everything. It's intended to get people to leave me alone because I can't take anymore. But maybe I don't want to yell at them. Maybe that's not that is an option. It's something my brain can do, but maybe it's not what I want to do. So maybe there's another way I could communicate to them, like, okay, uh, I need time for myself. So that means figuring out what do I need at that moment when I'm feeling that way. And what do I want people to do when I'm feeling that way? Do I want them to help me? Because people like to help, but maybe I don't want that help at that moment. Maybe I just want them to leave me alone, and that would be more helpful. So them coming and asking, "Oh, do you need anything? Are you okay?" It's like, I don't want this right now. So if I can tell them that, then I feel a lot better than if I end up just blowing up because they won't leave me alone. So practicing communication as one of those choices can help, but it takes, again, a lot of practice. And we can think about it a little bit before we even get into those situations to figure out, like, well, what do I want people to do? And what am I needing for myself? And so we can try to think of it when we're in a calmer state of mind and then practice it when we're actually in the situation. So there are different ways we can explain this to people. We can say, things like, hey, I'm pretty upset right now, but I will be fine. I would just like some time or some space to myself. And usually people respond pretty well to that. Like they might want to fix and calm things down, but maybe I don't need them to. Maybe it's okay that I feel upset by what happened. Maybe it's fair. So it's not a problem. I just want them to leave me alone and I'll take care of it. Or I can tell them that I am bothered by what they did or said, or bothered by the situation, but I would just like some space and I'll be fine. So we can tell a person what we want them to do, what they can do to help. They tend to respond better if we tell them what they can do to help than if we tell them what they should not do. All right. So if we keep telling people, don't do this, don't do that, they still feel confused and then they just kind of flail about and try to help us in ways that we don't really want. On the other hand, if we say, like, here's what you can do. You can leave me alone for right now. Just give me space. Let me calm down. I'll be fine eventually. All right. So I'm going to stop there for a moment. I think I've talked for about maybe 20 minutes, and I think that's a good stopping point.
Yay. Thank you, Charles, for that mini lecture. I hope it was informative for our audience. So now, next, we're actually going to go into a couple of situations and demonstrations. I think that would be helpful for the audience to kind of take home some of the messages that you're sharing tonight, Charles. So if you want to go ahead and stop sharing your slides, and then we can see all your faces. Thank you so much. Charles and Josie actually go through two different activities with each other, and kind of the first one's more focused on, they're going to describe a time they felt a specific emotion, describe what they experienced and or felt, and how easy or hard it was to communicate about it. So I'll let Josie go first, and then you can explain, Josie, kind of after the why and how of why you picked that certain emotion, and then Charles would do the same. Okay. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yes. Hello, everyone. So, this activity that I chose for this particular webinar, I've successfully done in groups before, specifically groups of adolescents and young adults. And I find it to be one of the more compelling and productive ways for people who may not always be able to recognize emotions to learn to recognize the emotions. So I will demonstrate first. The emotion that we discussed, Charles and I, for me to give my first example on is the emotion of anger. So what I'm going to be doing is describing a situation, and then after I describe this situation, and I'm going to go into more detail about the situation and then tell you about how that experience felt for me. And was it hard, easy, somewhere in the middle? And we'll dive deeper into what situations such as these can bring on emotionally for some people, especially those who have Tourette syndrome. So, yes, anger. I'm going to tell you about one of the times that I experienced one of the most deepest feelings of boiling anger that I have ever experienced. I was in college, and a professor kept telling me to turn off my phone because it was making noise, except it wasn't my phone, it was my tics. The first day of class, he called me out in front of the entire lecture hall. I then felt obligated to explain to everyone that I have tics and that I'm very sorry if they are being disruptive. This next part is probably the part that fueled my anger the most. So, the professor then referred to me after my discussion with my classmates. He referred to me as special needs in front of everybody else. And when I responded that that is not a term that I choose to identify with and to please not call me that, he did not listen. I was angry. Really, really angry. And honestly, I did not feel comfortable in that room. I wanted to leave. I wanted to disappear. I felt completely ignored, misunderstood, mistreated because one of the things that causes me to feel the most anger is being ignored. Well, when it comes to my preferences regarding my disability, that is probably the number one issue that if it is ignored, I will become furious. So this issue was not resolved. This professor did not change his verbiage and actions towards me until he left the school, which I was not sad about. And then some of that anger and resentment passed. Okay, so that is where I had one of the most difficult situations in all of school was that specific class. And how I would describe my feelings about that experience is unresolved. When I was telling this to all of you just now, it brought back the frustration and anger and anxiety of that entire class. Like, that class was one of the worst things to ever happen to me in school. I had to remember that I need to calm my own anger. I need to use my stress management skills. I have to consciously tell myself in my mind that this is no longer a current situation and that I need to ease my urge to go into fight or flight mode right now. Because nobody here is treating me like that. But thinking about it causes me to go back to that time. And part of the emotional regulation in this sense for me is that I have to validate my own feelings. And then, as far as how easy or hard it was to describe this, I would say this situation is in the middle for me. Talking about the emotions that are connected to this struggle brings me back to that moment, but I also have worked really hard on my ability to express and communicate my emotions. And the why and how, like Dal mentioned, the purpose behind this exercise is to not only understand reactions to feelings, but also to be intact with personal emotional regulation tactics, along with being able to validate feelings. Charles, would you like to give your example next?
Sure. Thank you, Chelsea. And I would also want to add that I think that the validation component is one of the most essential parts for people to be able to recognize that their emotions are valid. That's so valuable. Like if we insist that our emotions are unreasonable, then we just feel even more frustrated. So What comes to mind for me as an instance in which I had to struggle with my own emotional regulation was actually experiences as a parent. And as a parent, I very much love my children and want everything to be, as much as I can, perfect for them, right? Which means that I need to respond perfectly. I should never get angry. Well, that's unrealistic. Of course, I'll get angry. Um, but what I encounter more is the feeling of getting completely overwhelmed by what's going on around me. The repeated requests or questions or noises, and my brain won't stop responding to any of them. So if I hear noises in the back seat or just hear them talking in the back seat, my mind feels like it has to pay attention to it. It won't quit responding to them. Even if I don't say anything, my mind is responding anyway. So it's like constantly, it's like going back, going back, going back. And this is also something that we have seen in multiple studies now being uh, measurably demonstrated for individuals with Tourette's is that we tend to struggle more with habituating to situations. We have a much harder time than most of the rest of the population in getting used to things and blocking out noise or stimuli. So we don't tend to block it out, and that means our brains keep reacting to it. And it can be really overwhelming. And what I find is when I'm getting that way, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can feel it in my chest. It's almost kind of this sense of pressure or almost like it's squeezing. And I can feel it in my head where it feels like my head is in a vice and just getting squeezed. I'm like, I can't stop the pressure. And then I can notice it in my arms, the tension in the muscles in my arms. Like, it's not that I want to hit anything, just my arms feel tense. The muscles activate and they just don't want to seem to settle down. And these are all sensations that just naturally tend to show up for me when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So I can recognize the sensation now. And by practicing it, I can see that, yeah, there's those feelings again. I'm familiar with this. This is just like it was before. And now I need to use my strategies to take care of myself. How do I get myself through this situation? And I can do that once I can recognize what's happening. But if I never really tune into it and just try to get rid of the feeling, then I can never really benefit from that awareness. So one of the things I like to try to do for myself is to be able to be aware of it so then I can use my strategies at the appropriate moment for me. But it's not easy and it doesn't make things necessarily feel better. It just helps to manage my expectation of what might happen. And that makes me feel a little bit less stressed because I'm like, well, this is too much. I'm going to give myself a break. I'm going to take myself out of the situation if I can. And that's all right. I can take care of myself. It's fine. So that'd be my example.
Great. Thank you both for sharing those examples. And I'm so entranced by your storytelling, I have to say. So thank you so much for sharing those situations. So our scenario part two. So Jossie is going to play the role of a student in high school, and she's feeling a specific kind of emotion. Charles is going to play the role of her school counselor. So let's observe their interaction and see, we can actually see what emotion Jossie is revealing to us at the end. And then, of course, they'll go through the why and how. All right, take it away.
Dr. Gallion, I'm here again today. You know, I can't stay in class. They're laughing at me and they're mocking me and they're staring at me and they tell me that my tics make me ugly.
Hmm. That seems like that would feel really hurtful for you, Jossie. How are you feeling right now?
Embarrassed, upset. I don't want to go back. They keep saying over and over that I'm not going to be able to be a part of their group because I have too many disruptive tics. And this isn't the first time that these kids have made fun of me.
What have they been doing?
They've been laughing at me. They point at me, they copy my tics, and then they make faces at me, faces that are similar to my tics. And when I try to approach them about it, they started putting their hands on me.
Hmm.
And
What
then
did you do
and then
then?
other people that aren't even in the class. We were in the hallway. They tried to push me, and everybody comes around. They start gathering around. They pull out their phones, and they're making me feel like I'm some sort of monster, some sort of freak, and I can't stand to be here anymore. I don't want to be in this school anymore. I want to shrink. I want to run away. I'm embarrassed to take at school. I'm embarrassed to be myself. I want to hide because I don't fit in anywhere.
Hmm. No, that's not fair at all for them to do that to you, Chelsea. How do you, what did you do for yourself after this?
I went home and I sat by myself. And then I ended up taking my dog for a walk because sometimes when I feel really hurt and really upset when people make fun of me and laugh at me, just need to go do something with my dog because my dog doesn't make fun of me.
Hmm. How did you feel taking your dog for a walk?
A little better.
Hmm.
I still keep repeating in my head about those people. They try to push me and they try to boss me around and make fun of me, call me names. You know how you said that their words can't hurt me? Sometimes I feel like they can.
Words can hurt, can't they?
They can. They they can hurt and they can cause me to shrink, cause me to feel like I don't belong. But you're right. They can't change me, and I don't think I want to be someone else. I just want to not feel like I'm less than, physically and emotionally.
That makes sense. Hmm. That's totally fair, Jossie. You shouldn't have to feel less than, and it's natural to want to be able to fit in with everybody else, to have that feeling.
I think that it would be beneficial for them to learn about how treating other people this way is incredibly damaging and hurtful.
That's a good idea. What would you want them to know?
I want them to know that I want to be treated just like anybody else. I don't want to be viewed as different in a poor way or looked at weird given snarls and people hiding behind their books laughing at me. I just want to be included. I don't want to relive this moment of being shoved down in the hallway and laughed at by everyone in the school.
Hmm.
I want to be included. I want to be valued.
Hmm.
I don't know what I did to make them all hate me.
Do you think you actually did anything?
No.
Yeah, I don't think you did either. Do you think they understand, though?
They might understand, but they don't choose to do the right thing.
I think you're right about that. They do need to learn.
I think that eventually it'll be understood that making somebody else feel less than doesn't make you look any better.
Hmm.
They can't bring me down because I am able to be a good person. I'm always going to do the right thing in this kind of situation where I'm not going to be rude back or say mean things back or do mean things back because it won't benefit me to make other people feel bad about themselves, like they are saying bad things about me and doing bad things to me. It doesn't make me feel better.
Yeah. It sounds like you've still been finding your choice, Jossie.
Yes.
I think that's great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jossie, and thanks you, Charles, for acting out that scenario. Do you want to go a bit more now to the why and how that conversation panned out for you both, for the audience to learn a little bit more?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we chose this conversation. I don't know if you guys caught on to the specific emotion, but we chose humiliated as the feeling that was being described. This specific exercise helps with recognition of emotions and either within yourself or within others, being able to read how you feel, explain how you feel, discover how you feel, um, and maybe even be able to be the type of person that is there for others who are feeling or experiencing certain emotions like this, and practicing communication and connection. These are incredible ways to connect with other people, learn to understand how where other people are coming from. I'm pretty sure we all know somebody who doesn't have Tourette syndrome. So, as somebody with Tourette syndrome, you're on a specific instance where some people might not know how to approach your situation. But with teaching yourself how to connect, communicate, as well as regulate emotions regarding situations such as the ones that we just described, it can be life changing. Being able to make those connections. Yes.
Awesome. Anything else to add to that, Charles?
Um, no. I think Jossie described it really well.
Yeah, and I know you also mentioned the keyword choice. I heard choice right
Yeah.
there in Agman. That's amazing. All right. Well, thank you both for demonstrating that conversation. I hope the audience found that really helpful. So we're gonna be moving into our Q&A portion of tonight, but I know before we do that, I wanted to actually share a QR code for our survey. So if you could all whip out your phones and give me 1 second to pull up that um, QR code for you all. Can someone confirm that they can see this slide? Awesome. Please take a moment to go ahead and get a picture of that QR code with your phone and take a few seconds to answer that survey. Again, super important that you want to capture any feedback about tonight's program. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep this QR code up a little longer, but Jossie and Charles, I'm going to go ahead and start looking in our Q&A box to see if any questions came in during our session tonight. So let me see here. So we did get one question in the Q&A. Looks like Bridget from our audience members asking, my newly diagnosed daughter with TIAS often processes reactions with emotions first over rational thoughts. She peaks before thinking through a problem. How can I talk her through her thoughts, supporting or calming her? I'll let you go.
Well, one thing that I have found helpful, especially for young children, and learning how to practice that skill, is that first, I really want them to understand that it is a skill that is built with practice, and I don't expect them to be able to do it right away. And so, as a parent, we can coach them in trying to practice it and walking them through it and helping kind of support them as they try to do this. This may mean that first, before we do any kind of choice practice, we're going to say like, well, looks like you're feeling really worked up. So we help them like recognize how they're feeling so that they can see that. And we don't make them feel ashamed for the way they feel. We just say like, looks like you're feeling really worked up. Why don't we just kind of relax for a moment or just chill out for a moment? Don't have to do anything. We don't have to make it work right now. And then we'll work on it. Because I want them to learn that the feeling itself doesn't lead always to trouble. That's one of the things that kids often encounter difficulty with is that strong emotions show up. Maybe the behaviors that are not the most desirable behaviors are what manifest in response, and then they get in trouble. And then the brain learns that feeling gets me in trouble. So it kind of quickly jumps to the end result. We want to help their brain relearn that the feeling doesn't necessarily mean you get in trouble. So let's give you a way of trying to get through that. So I would say metaphorically, we walk alongside them as they're dealing with the feeling. It's a really big feeling. It might be too big for them. And so we stay there with them. We're not going to leave them to deal with it on their own. We're not going to punish them for having the feeling. We're just going to say, oh, that looks like a really strong feeling right now, or a big feeling, or whatever language they relate to. And then we go with them as they are working their way through it. And maybe we come back to problem solving after we get to a point where we can do that. Like we may not be doing problem solving when we have a really strong feeling. Not yet. And that's okay.
Anything to add to that, Jossie?
Yeah, I think that was a wonderful explanation, by the way. And one thing I wanted to add about the supporting and calming aspect is going back to the feeling validation that I mentioned earlier, on top of all of the things that Charles just said are great points and are very valuable in helping a younger person with TS learn how to maybe stop and think before they react emotionally, because that can be very, very difficult. But just as far as supporting and calming, the validation and the soothing and regulation, being a calm person, being an understanding and accepting person to go to, that is incredibly valuable. So very valuable, yes.
It reminds me, I've heard some of my colleagues describe it as co-regulating, which I think it's a good term to use to describe it. That as an adult, we might have more capacity to regulate that emotion. So we can let them use some of our capacity to help them work their way through it.
Great. Thank you both for answering that. Let's see. Our next question from our audience is, my newly diagnosed son is 11. He's always been aggressive, either verbally or physically. How can I help his brain get through that and help him develop this? He doesn't like to communicate much and said none of these questions would work for him. He'd rather not talk at all. He also has anxiety. So multiple parts to this one.
Well, there's one thing that I've encountered that frequently in my work, because I do a lot of work with kids, and many times kids, when they first approach therapy, they don't want to talk, and that's okay. So I give them an alternative to talking at first, and like I'll let them use gestures if they want to, so they can shake their head or nod or whatever, and I give them that kind of option, a different way of going. So it's like, if you don't want to talk, you can just hold up your hand for right now. So like that. Um, and then I praise them for that. So I'm praising them for communicating. It's not verbal communication, but it's still communication. And if they get praised for that communication, then it might make it feel a little bit easier to communicate more the next time. And then maybe a little bit more the next time, and it just builds. We they they may have to learn that it's okay to communicate, that it's safe to communicate, even if they don't have the right words for it. And anxious kids are often more concerned about having the right words or saying the right thing anyway. So we can recognize that for them too and say, like, I understand it may feel really difficult to talk right now. That's fine. You don't have to tell me a whole lot. Just kind of show me, what do you want? Like, do you want people to leave you alone? You can do this. And I'll give you a signal, and you can work that out between the two of you, which signal you want to use to communicate those things.
I agree with that. And one of the things that I can say that helped me when I was around your son's age was changing the physical, like, environment that I was in. So if I was starting to get aggressive or, like, even not even just aggressive, just angry, like, upset, strong emotions of any sort, changing where I was, finding a physical other location to go to. Um, as far as the communicating part, that also helped because I know Charles mentioned that a lot of kids, when they first come to therapy, they don't want to speak at first, which is normal. I mean, now that I work with kids, it's very, very common that a lot of kids don't feel comfortable quite at first. So changing the location. A lot of my kids, they like to go on walks. We go on walks. We go outside. We feel the grass. We do a lot of regulation of our bodies before we jump into any major verbal communication. Getting to know where they're comfortable first and meeting them at that space where they're comfortable is valuable because we have to start somewhere. We have to build from where we begin. And I know that it can even be more challenging as somebody with anxiety because that enters some even more feelings and stressors that come on top of having TS. So being able to find out what they need at that point. What do they need right now? Being able to recognize, like, do I need to walk away? Do I need to go outside? Do I need to get a drink of water? Do I need to feel something in my hands? Do I need to change something about my environment? That was a huge first step in communication for me because I know that in order for me to get comfortable, it took a lot of let's take a lot of the rest of the stress off first. Allow me to feel comfortable before I can be vulnerable. I hope that was helpful.
Thanks.
I just want to add really quick because I totally agree with what Jossie's saying, and I think that um, a good way of illustrating also part of the common difficulty with the way adults communicate and the way children communicate. They don't communicate the same way, right? So like adults like to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation. That's really intense, especially for kids, because they are in a completely power dynamic with adults, right? So like kids are not typically able to approach it feeling like equals. So if you sit down and talk to them face to face, that feels intense and intimidating often for them. So it's like, no, you walk alongside them. You guys go do something together, even if you just play a game together. That gives it a different context, one that the kids feel comfortable with. You go back to the things that are their lives, and they have an easier time talking to you.
That's great. Thank you both. Let's see here. Our next question, Elizabeth from the audience says, my 12-year-old daughter has a very large emotional outburst frequently. And then it also continues down here. She screams at us, slams doors, and cries. We try to help calm her, but sometimes it does not work. She has been in therapy for 6 months and is learning techniques, but says they don't work in the moment. Any advice on how we can help and how parents can cope with this? It's really hard on the whole family.
That is hard. I think I would be inclined to start from the position of helping her learn that it really is okay to feel upset. It's not the feeling that people are trying to fix. It's like nobody is going to tell her like you shouldn't be mad or calm yourself down. It's like that's not gonna it's gonna feel like she's doing the wrong thing then, and that'll make her brain reactive to that. And she'll probably then do more stronger actions like yelling, slamming doors, stomping, in order to try to make her point clear that she wants to be left alone. Um, so I would start with, I think, validating the feeling.
Maybe, Chelsea?
Definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Um, so when it comes to, oh no, it disappeared. I was reading it and then it disappeared. Oh, there it is. Okay. So when it comes to the screaming and slamming doors and crying, and when she says that the skills that she's learning don't work in the moment, I understand that. I understand that so deeply because we learn our emotional regulation skills, but when we go into this rage, it's like all thinking, all rational thinking just goes out the window. So as far as being able to cope with those moments, having a safe environment, and I found it helpful, like for me personally, because I definitely have these outbursts still as an adult. It's not something that has necessarily gotten easier for me physically, but I've been emotionally able to handle it better. And being able to sit down as a family and asking her what she needs. Because, wait, did you say how old she was? But she's been in therapy for 6 months. Okay. Um, she might not know exactly what she needs, but she might have an idea of like, hey, if I'm starting to have one of these moments where I slam doors and I cry and I get upset, it's best for me to go walk away for a little bit. It's best for me to take some time away. Or she might say, I want somebody to stay by me. I want somebody to be with me. I want somebody to talk me through this. I want somebody to show me that they are present at that time that I'm needing them. And there's a lot of needs that could be possibly needing to be met at that time. It might help her to, like I said, go outside. There's a lot of things that I'm able to change about my regulation when I go outside. Um, being able to speak with her in times that she is not raging, that allow her to openly express what these emotions may be behind it. She may not even know right now. Um, sometimes there isn't even a clear trigger as to why um these rages come on. But as far as advice on helping the family cope is having her back. Having her back, knowing that when this happens, I am present and I want to do what I can to help. Because while we cannot prevent these rages and stressful emotions, we can learn and grow together. And like I said, we got to start somewhere.
Right. Thank you, Jossie.
Thank you.
I think we have maybe time for maybe one more question. I
Okay.
know we won't get to all of them tonight, so thank you for submitting those. We'll make sure we get them to our speakers later to support a response later. But I think this was interesting. My audience member asked, are there feelings in the I think probably like physical feelings in the body that accompany strong feelings? Does it help to recognize those sensations, feelings in the body?
Yes.
Maybe we'll end with that.
Yes, yes. That is like we be relying somehow on our ability to just recognize it in our mind otherwise. And feelings often don't make sense. So it's like I may have a strong feeling and it's not a logical feeling. So I can't really figure out in my mind why I'm feeling the way I am, but the feeling is there anyway. And so how do I know the feeling is there? Well, it's in my body. That's where the feeling shows up. It's what I feel in my arms, my chest, my neck, my head, my jaw, and so on. So in recognizing that that feeling, we can observe it, we can attend to it, we can examine it. And we gradually, by doing that, can change our relationship with the feeling. It ceases to be something we have to avoid or get away from. Instead, it can become something like, oh, yeah, there's that feeling. I know that one. And it's a lot less frightening that way.
Any
Yeah.
last?
I also would say physical feelings in the body are different than the feelings that we want to have in our brain. So, especially during my rages, my body is feeling a certain way, a way that my brain doesn't want to feel, but it's forcing me to feel anyway. So, being able to safely express that anger and that sometimes built up aggression and stress, having a way to disembark the painful feelings within my body, like the actual need to hit something or I will not be able to move on with life. So being able to safely express that physical feeling in my body is how I'm going to be able to calm the feelings in my brain. Those unwanted like thoughts and feelings that just keep coming at you that are undesirable and unwanted and often are not rational. So, in times like that, when there are true feelings in the body and they don't match the feelings in the brain, especially when the trigger isn't always clear, it's really it's hard to manage, but it's definitely doable with practice and learning to understand what individuals' needs are.
Thank you so much to you both. That was a wonderful Q&A session. I know we didn't get to all the questions today, but I want to again thank you both for such an engaging session tonight. So, but don't leave yet. We're actually going to go ahead and launch our knowledge post test to test how if you were all paying attention. So, Wendy, whenever you're ready, please activate the post test poll, and I'm pretty sure people will know the correct answer. So, go ahead. Great. Awesome. You've seen the answers come in. All right. Right. Great. Thank you everyone so much for answering. So the answer to the first question, true or false? It is false. That is correct. Being mad is a problem. We should stop it from happening. That is false. And which of the functions below can help with regulation when you're feeling strong emotion? The answer is choice. So thank you so much for participating in our poll tonight, everyone. Really appreciate it. And I'm really glad that you're here to spend time with Charles and Jossie. And I all wish you a really good evening. So before we all go, I just wanted to say that you will receive an email with the link to tonight's recording in a few business days. So give us a couple of days to make sure we send the link out. It will be on our YouTube page as well. But also please reach out to programideas@tourette.org if you have an exciting idea that you'd like for us to implement in our programming in the future. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Wendy for putting in all of those helpful links and resources, and reach out to Support Tourette as well if you need more support. So thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you to Charles and Jossie. You're amazing. And I all wish you all a really good evening, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone. Stop recording.